So, welcome to episode 2 of Money. And we've been preparing in various ways for this episode. It's going to be a fun episode, but we're going to start off with a message that came from a listener who asked a question last episode, our first episode. And he was so interested in that answer that he decided to try again. His name's Elmer. He's actually a friend of mine. And I'm going to read the question, Jodie Lynn. This is a question for you to answer because you're the financial consultant in the room here. But Elmer wrote, I am retired with Social Security money, enough to pay bills and enjoy life to some degree. I also have savings, mostly in bank CDs, as I am not good with investing. How can I invest those CDs, about 35K total as an example, for short-term gains with low risks that can be better than the CDs themselves in the 3.5 to 3.75 average percent range? Open a Fidelity or Robinhood account and invest in some ETFs, or I find studying and buying stocks and investing to be, in general, very boring, and I just want to make a little extra to travel the world. So that's what Elmer's asking about, Jodie Lynn. What do you think?
Okay, well, I think that we could go a bunch of different ways with this question, and tie in law of attraction. First, I'll give you my thought from the financial advising perspective. And this is not financial advice. This is just
This is
for entertainment.
educational.
Yeah, education, entertainment purposes.
Yes.
Um, I mean, you could go with an ETF. The thing that I don't like about ETFs is that you're literally just setting it and forgetting it. You have lower fees, sure. But when things are getting crazy out there in the world, which we've seen a lot of in the last 5, 6 years, I feel like more so the last 5, 6 years than I'd felt before, but not necessarily. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. I felt the crazy before that. But I think that if you could have somebody actively managing your money, then they're looking at what's happening from a global perspective, the microeconomics, the macroeconomics. For example, someone that's in a position like I am, I'm just the agent, I liaison between the client, explain to them their risks, that kind of stuff, pick the best investment. But inside of the actual fund, there's a money manager. I always call them the man in the ivory tower in Toronto. It could be one too. But somebody who is very, very smart, and this is all they do. All they do is they look at this money. They have a big pile of money, their own money included. That's something to ask. Is the money manager required to be invested in their funds that they're managing? Because now they have skin in the game. So I like that. But they have teams of hundreds of people that are looking at, like I said, the macro and micro economic perspective, but they're also looking at the corporate perspective. Once I was in a meeting and they were talking about the CEO change at a company. It's a global company, but there's a couple of plants around this area. It's a fertilizer company. And they were talking about this guy's character, the new person coming in. They had that level of detail. And obviously, they're looking at the financials of the company and like what they have for assets on their books. What do they have for debt? What is their plan? What is their philosophy moving forward? Which all of that is a lot of detail and very complex to look at every single company when you're just looking at this in the evenings or the weekends. And that's, I guess, my opinion on why an active money manager is a really great opportunity to grow your money because they're doing all the heavy lifting.
And let
Now,
me interrupt for a second because I want to stay on that point for a moment. The
yeah,
idea of hiring a professional money manager, because it's not part of the usual advice that you hear.
yeah.
It's pretty unusual advice. It's good advice, I think, but it's not the typical advice that you hear. So if Elmer or anybody decides they want to do something like that, how do they go about finding that person?
You're probably going to have to go through an agent kind of like me. So I mean, your bank has investment advisors. There's independent companies like I believe you guys have like an Edward Jones
Mhm.
in the United States. The companies are going to be a little bit different. The company that I work for, World Financial Group, there is the World Financial Group there. So you would want to go to a company like that that has access to funds that have money managers. The reality is the world that we live in, it's very difficult unless you have millions or a lot of money to go directly to a money manager and say, I want you to manage my money without paying a lot of money. And having a lot of money to get access to them. Usually you can go through an advisor where they have a big company, and because they're bringing so many clients, they have access to funds that are actively managed in the market.
And now the impossible question to answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway because that's part of my job.
Yes.
The CD, he knows he can get 3.5 to 3.75%. What can he reasonably expect to get if he's going through an Edward Jones who's using a money manager?
Well, okay, I can't speak to Edward Jones. I can't speak to the exact profile that he would be in. I know that he said something about low risk. So I would say
Mhm.
something conservative. I have clients in conservative portfolios that over the last year have done 6, 7%. So
Okay.
usually on a conservative portfolio, you're looking a little bit lower than that, maybe 5%, somewhere in there, but it's not, you can get a great fund that is lower risk. So meaning it's not going to swing so much with the market. Um, and it's not and you could get great returns like, 5, 6, 7%.
Okay. All right. So you also mentioned the energetic side. We should touch on that side because we also have our woo-woo side. We're
Yeah, yeah.
practical, but we're also woo-woo. We're both. So
Yes.
let's go woo.
Okay, well, woo side of things. There's a couple of different things in Elmer's question. He said, I don't want to study the stocks and investigate. That doesn't interest him. So, on the energetic side of things, first and foremost, you could attract somebody that does like that, like a financial advisor, like somebody like me, but in your state, your country, the place where you are. And I think that we are so powerful at connecting or drawing in the right people to us. So as soon as you open it up to the universe that you want to find somebody, and I think being clear on what that person is like, personality wise, how they communicate with you, like what kind of experience do you want to have when you go through this? I think that that's important to nail down. How much information do you want? Do you want them to explain it in a way that makes sense to you? Like, what are your priorities and what are your values? Note those things down and then put it out to the universe. I want to be introduced to somebody that's like this, that could do this for me. That's the first point of the energetic perspective because we don't have to do things on our own. I mean, there's different professions for a reason. You don't need to be a jack of all trades. If this isn't your jam, it's also not my jam sitting down and looking at each individual stock. I know a lot about different funds, the funds that I can offer. I know a lot about what's going on in the market, but I don't want to go to that menial level of like, who do they have in as their CEO and what does their balance sheet look like? I don't want to do that. I don't have enough time for that in my life, so I get that point. So I would say first step, if you want to work with somebody, get clear on what you want, how you want that interaction to be, and the things that maybe you're nervous about, that you would like to, what would be soothing for you. I mean, you're investing in CDs for a reason because there's a guarantee on it, essentially. That's it. You like that guarantee. But when you start to look at a different picture, when you start to look at that guarantee over time and how much inflation is taking away from your money, it ends up being a not so great guarantee. The other perspective on the energetic side of things, when I just simply look at the words in this question, Elmer said, I want to invest short-term gain with low risk. Behind that phrase of low risk is fear. Fear of losing your money, fear of the markets tanking, fear of, the bank going bankrupt or whatever the fear is there. And when we talk about law of attraction, one thing that we focus on a lot in these conversations is disconnecting that attachment and letting go of that scarcity and that fear. So I think from the energetic perspective, understanding what makes you nervous about it and what would make you feel better, would help you get towards the path that you need to take to be able to have a little extra money to go traveling the world.
So it isn't so much about getting your wording right, it's about deciding where you are energetically.
Yeah, absolutely. And being open to the possibility of something different being presented to you.
All right, that's good. You also mentioned something else. I want to make sure that we kind of hammer it a little bit. You
Yeah,
said you yourself, you don't want to have to go in and do all the little details about, who's the CEO and what's their background and are they trustworthy and all that.
yeah,
And the point I want to make is that's why you're connected to a company that does have a money manager that does exactly that.
exactly. Yeah. I know who to go to. I can't remember if it was Henry Ford. I think he said, I don't know everything, but I know the people who do. Like I've got the people in my corner that do. That's how we need to look at money, at I mean, raising kids, like everything, health. You want to create a village of people that are in your corner. That's really what I love to do inside of the financial advising part of things. I like to be there for my clients, be a sounding board, help them get to their goals and their dreams, whatever that may be. And I never profess to know it all, but I do say that I'll go find an answer for us because I do know lots of people that know lots of things. I don't need to know it all. I just need to know that I have the people in my corner that I can ask when I get stuck or, bail me out for lack of a better term.
That's good. Yeah, I like that. And you're touching on something that means something to me specifically, because for the
Mhm.
longest time, I felt like I did have to be that person who knew it all because I'm a male. I was in a marriage. I was the one who was supposed to be responsible for all this stuff. And I was the one who was more monetarily understanding. I understood the finances better. I still
Yeah.
didn't have all the answers, but I felt like I was supposed to.
Yeah.
Felt
No.
like I was supposed to. And that was a huge mistake. That was a
Huge mistake. Huge mistake. You're never going to know everything about everything. Um, but I think you focus on the things that you like to learn about. And for me, when I'm dealing with professionals, I want somebody that will bring it to my level and then explain it in a way that I can understand without the fancy language and terms and things like that. Bring it back down to the basics of whatever it is we're talking about. Explain it like a fifth grader. And if you can't do that, then I won't work with you.
And also, that person should have that connection to the people who do understand it, who do have all the background about how all this stuff works. It's those
100%.
connections are what make all the difference. It's not just talking to somebody who knows how to talk nice to you. It's
Yeah.
talking to somebody who knows how to talk nice to you, who also has access to the right people who do understand this stuff.
Yeah. And is willing to spend the time that you need to feel comfortable to move forward.
Yes.
Because, you know, the best clients that I have are the ones that feel empowered and have a general sense of what's going on. And more importantly, maybe they feel like they can ask me any question. And that if even if I don't have the answer, they know that I'll do the work to find out an answer for them.
See, already we're on episode 2 of Money, the very second episode. The first one was last week, second one this week, and already we're touching on one of the most important things that does not get discussed. Let's be
Yeah.
honest, this doesn't get discussed at this level of detail. And I'm so
No.
glad that we're doing that here.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It is complex, but it doesn't have to be complicated. There's ways that you can understand the information presented in a way that works for you, in a way that makes you feel good. Like, okay, I like the direction we're going. I feel good about this. I think that's the most important thing.
Wonderful. I love this. Well, we have a lot of different directions we can go in today. I want to take a moment to encourage other listeners who heard Elmer, his question got asked and answered, and I think probably answered more thoroughly than on any other money type podcast out there. I mean, there are some
Yeah.
great answers out there. Don't get me wrong. There are people out there who really know their stuff, but I'm not so sure that I've ever heard the answer as direct and clear and based in reality and also tied to how we're feeling about stuff in the
Yes.
same answer before. I don't think I've
Thank
ever heard that before.
thank you. Well, good. I'm glad. I hope it was helpful for everyone.
Yeah. So I want to encourage other people who want to do the same thing. We have a website set up specially for you so you can submit your question. You can do it as a video, you can do it as just an audio file, or you can do it like Elmer did. You can type the question in. Any of those three ways, comes to us, we get it and we start including it on the podcast. And the only way that your question won't make it is if we get inundated with so many questions, which I think is going to happen at some point. But
Yeah,
if that happens, then we have to start being selective. But up until then, this is the time to get your question in because you're going to get it in. We're in the first few episodes. That's the best time to do it.
100%. I also wanted to add something else, if I could.
Sure.
I think that where you're at in life, we kind of talked about this before we started the show, where you're at in life and counting that into the conversation is important because where you are, Walt, and where I am today, two different stories,
Very
two
much.
different, not pathways, but what's important to you right now and what's important to me is two different things. We're
It's
just
very true.
two different places. So
Yeah.
I think, the other thing about, investing in something that you can get 3.5% or 3.75 and it's guaranteed, what I would weigh in that individual's shoes is how they feel about this pot of money that they want to invest. And if they were to lose a little bit, if you look at any chart, and you back up 10 years, you can see that it goes up. But you have to be able to back away from the situation and not narrow into this moment today or last week or whatever it was. I actually had a client last year and he was so freaked out when all the tariffs were announced, and I'm in Canada.
Mm.
When the tariffs were announced and the stock market went down.
Yeah.
And he was so worried about it. And, I had this money invested, and I was concerned that he might take the money out and that he wouldn't save it. He would spend it on other things, and that was a crucial piece of their entire retirement. And I remember trying to reason with him of like, it's gone down now temporarily, but when we talk in 6, 7 months from now, it's going to be up. Like, this is just how things work. It's the initial scare of, Trump said something, or like, this happened, or whatever. There's going to be this decline and, recovery period. And, something that a lot of advisors say is the best days in the market follow the worst days in the market. And there's lots and lots of proof of that, but you have to be able to stomach it. So if investing in the market where there's any sort of swing, and maybe if we get woo on this, if you're into muscle testing, and you don't even have to muscle test, but you can put your nervous system through the scenario. Okay, if I lose 1%, and what's the math on, whatever the money is, if I lose 1% and that lasts for a year, how's that going to feel? Where do I
Mhm.
feel that? What do I feel? Is if it's 2%, what if it's 3%? What if it's 5%? And put yourself through the scenario emotionally and energetically. What do you feel comfortable with? And there is no absolute right way for every person because our values are different. Where we're going is different. What's important to us is different. So you need to count those things in. And at the end of the day, your answer still might be to invest in the guaranteed return because of your age, what you want to do with this money, and what's important to you, and how risk adverse you might feel if something what like that was to happen.
Fantastic answer. I really like that a lot.
Thank you.
Actually, something that you said cued something in my mind. I mentioned this to you about a week and a half ago. There's a book that my friend Joel Elston, co-host on LOA Today, mentioned to
Yeah.
me called The Psychology of Money. I asked you if you'd
Mhm.
read it. You hadn't read it. I hadn't read it. But I did get a copy of it. It has a story at the very beginning of the book, and I want to share the story because I think it's the basis for a conversation here. Now, he was trying to make a very particular point. I'm not going to try to make his point. I want us to just take it within the context of what we've been talking about. He says that there is a Wikipedia entry that's his favorite. It begins, Ronald James Reed was an American philanthropist, investor, janitor, and gas station attendant.
Okay.
Now, the story is a really interesting story. This is a guy who was born and raised in rural Vermont. He was the first person in his family to graduate high school. It was also made impressive by the fact that he hitchhiked to campus each day. So it was one of those, rural kind of experiences, right?
Hmm.
He worked at a gas station for 25 years. He swept floors at J.C. Penney for 17 years. Now, many, many years ago, he bought a two-bedroom house for $12,000. At that time, he was 38 years old. He lived there for the rest of his life. He was widowed at age 50. He never remarried. And our friend recalled that his main hobby was chopping wood. He died in 2014 at age 92. And when he died, he had a net worth of $8 million.
Hmm.
And everybody said, where did he get this money? This is a janitor. This is a guy who was a mechanic in a gas station. And what he did was he saved all his money and invested it in blue chip stocks and
Hmm.
reinvested it and reinvested it and reinvested it. And so
Hmm.
by the time he was gone, I mean, he didn't do anything with his life. He just kept reinvesting the money.
Hmm.
And by the time he was done, he had $8 million. He had, beneficiaries who were very, very happy with him.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
That'd be
Now,
great.
he follows up this story. The author follows up the story with a second story, a gentleman named Richard Foscone, who was actually from Connecticut, where I live, from Greenwich, Connecticut, which is right near New York City, very wealthy area. Richard was a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive. He had an MBA, very successful. And he, like so many, had challenges, particularly in the mid 2000s. And especially, he was invested in an 18,000 square foot home in Greenwich, Connecticut that had 11 bathrooms, two elevators, two pools, seven garages.
Whew.
It cost more than 90 grand a month to maintain it.
Wow.
And then the 2008 financial crisis hit and wiped him out,
Ugh.
left him bankrupt. He had to go before a bankruptcy judge and say, I currently have no income.
Ugh.
His Palm Beach house was foreclosed.
Yep.
Now, this is a guy who had it all and lost it all.
Yeah.
And he did it in relatively the same time frame that the other guy working as a janitor made 8 million bucks.
Hmm.
Now, the author is making a different point from the one that we're addressing here, but it raises some interesting thoughts in our minds. The first one is the first guy's experience demonstrates what happens if you invest and reinvest and reinvest and you don't do anything with the money.
Hmm.
The second one shows what happens when you, and by the way, I didn't give you the whole story on the second one. The second one, he went deep into debt, lots of investing that went awry. It was not well thought out investing. He basically set himself up to fail, even though he had this MBA from a marvelous school and so forth. Nevertheless, he ended up setting himself up for failure. And what the author was trying to make the point was the second guy was greedy, the first guy was thrifty. That was his point. Not my point. My point is you can have two different people who
The
have
janitor was greedy?
no, the other one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. One was
The guy in
greedy. The
Greenwich,
other.
Connecticut was greedy. The janitor was the opposite of greedy. He was practically altruistic, according
Okay.
to the author.
Okay.
My point is that regardless of whether you apply greedy or altruistic or any other, whether you demonize or praise or whatever, the point that I want to point is that the first guy didn't do anything with his money except invest it. He didn't actually live with it.
Nope.
He chopped wood all of his life. That
Hmm.
was his life. And it was what he chose to do. And I respect his right to do that. But I also remember that's not what most people do. I mean,
Hmm.
the moment you have a family, you just reduce the 8 million to probably 2 million. Just
Yeah.
because you had a family, you got expenses, you got things you got to pay for that you wouldn't normally pay for.
Hmm.
So there's that to take into account. Now, yes, the guy from Greenwich, Connecticut, he also made some pretty foolish business decisions. First of all, investing in a house that costs 90 grand a month to maintain, probably not his smartest move.
Yep.
I mean, that one's pretty, questionable. But it also points to somebody who is looking to make quick hits, because that's the kind of investment that would lead to that kind of a loss. We're not talking about investing in a 3.5% CD.
No.
We're t-
No.
we're talking about something that had high leverage and really high risk associated with it.
That's right.
So,
Yes.
so one was a guy who invested everything at a relatively low risk and took nothing out of it. And the other one is the story of a guy who invested in very high risk, tried to take everything out of it, and ended up getting crushed. Two extremes. two
Mhm.
really vastly different extremes.
Mhm.
The rest of us are somewhere in the middle of those two extremes.
Yes. But I think that there's a lot of things we could take away from these stories.
Okay.
The first thing that pops out to me is not greed versus thriftiness, it's values, what you value. The Greenwich Village man valued looking prestigious, like having a big house, being the definition, quote unquote, of success that maybe he saw from others. It was more of what I used to call on our other show, plastic happy. He was driven, sounds like, I don't know the man, sounds like he was driven by what he thought he needed to do to be successful, buying things, buying that ginormous home that costs $90,000 a month to operate when you don't have other capital and your business obviously isn't that secure. Like, uh, it looks like showmanship. He was valuing the way that everybody else perceived him. Whereas Woodcutter Man, he didn't care. I would guess his value was safety. It wasn't about using the money. I bet you he wanted to hold on to every penny that he could because there was a time in his life where he had no pennies. So it didn't matter how many pennies he had now stacked up by the time that he was dying. Something inside of his value system said we need to save so that we're safe. That would be my bet. So I think it's a divergent of value systems. And a lot of times when we're dealing with money, we're not really involving our values. What's important to us? Um, I look at my own life of I was going down a path of the fast lane, my dad calls it, working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, making lots of money, wanted a big house. I actually lived in a giant house, 3,000 square feet. It was empty. Had a really nice car, turbo engine and all the bells and whistles and all of those things. Because at that time in my life, I had the belief system that I had to have a life that looked like this. That meant that I was successful. And for me, it was realizing that for me was plastic happy. I wasn't happy. I was in this giant house all alone. Like from the outside, it looked good. On the inside, it was hollow. And so I was spending all of my money on things that I perceived I valued at that time in my life. And I think that we do. We say, "Oh, I want to spend this. I deserve this." Like my husband and I don't have any new vehicles. We also don't have any new vehicle payments. No
Yeah.
new vehicles, no new payments, nothing like that. And I know other people in my circle, they got to get a new vehicle every 5 years and, whatever. And I'm like, for me, what I value is having less debt, less, it's not even the debt part of things, less responsibilities when it comes to my money. Because the more responsibilities you have for your money, the more money you have to make. If you have less responsibilities with your money, then you have more freedom and flexibility in what you want to do. But we've been so um, brainwashed as a society into believing you got to have the house and it's got to look like this and you got to have the car and it's got to look like this. And we over leverage ourselves because somebody said these things should be important to you instead of checking within and saying, what do I really value? What's really important to me? My brother was asking me this question about my dad and said, how did dad do it? How did dad, fill up his RRSPs? That's kind of like an IRA account, I believe. How did he fill up his RSPs every year? And how did he have all this money? And la la la. And it comes down to values. My dad valued putting that money away. And that's why we wore hand-me-downs. That's why we never traveled on a plane until we could afford it on our own when we were adults. That's why we didn't play any sports. Like we went to rodeos and races because my dad was the announcer, so he got paid to be there. He did things that were fun for him that also came with a paycheck so he could keep doing them. That was in alignment with his philosophy. And that's what he thought was right. Doesn't mean that it is. That's just what he wanted and what he felt was right. So we all have to check ourselves. on what are we spending our money on and is it in alignment with our values? And my last point is that reality is really not real. And I've seen this over and over and over and over again inside of my own life, inside of other people's lives. One of the first things I do with a lot of clients when they're like, I don't have any money, where does your money go? Let's take a look. And it's actually a part of my coaching practice too, because I was floored. When I did this, everything that I teach, I did myself. I put myself through the exercises because I feel like that's important. I wanted to learn it. I needed to learn it and master it before teaching somebody else. But one of the first things I did was I would have swore to you that I never carried cash, ever carried cash. Never, ever. I would have bet you $1 million. I never carried cash and that I was always on budget. I knew exactly where my money was going. Do you think that was the reality? Well,
That's a loaded question. I'm not going to answer that one.
the answer is no. The answer is no. Somebody challenged me at a T. Harv Eckert event to make these cups and put your cash in the cups, and I was like, "You guys are retarded. I don't carry any cash ever, but I'll make these stupid solo cups. Sure, I'll put them on my dresser, and I'll show you in 6 months from now they're gonna be freaking empty, but whatever." And I did it inside of my bank account too because I just I'm stubborn. So I did it both places and I thought that I would be right. Okay, well, option or story number one, in 3 months, I had $1,300 in change in those cups.
Wow.
3 months. I never said I had cash ever. So how many 3 month periods of $1,300 just were gone? We're gone. And then when I looked at my budget, what I did was without any sort of emotion, no shame, no anger, no guilt, like no beating myself up with a big stick. Let's just look at the last 3 months. What did Jodie Lynn spend? Without that, big stick, like just from a purely numbers standpoint. And I was shocked. I was spending, I don't know, $500 to $700 a month on McDonald's, like fast food things. And I would have bet you I never really ate out. So our perception can be distorted based on what we think is happening versus the reality. And the last story that I'll tell you is that I met a woman. It was actually one of my agents sitting down with this woman. She worked at 7-Eleven, not as a manager, as a clerk.
Mhm.
7-Eleven. And she worked, I believe it was in between part-time and full-time. She never really worked full-time. And she had kids at home and a husband. I think they had 4 children.
Wow.
And when my agent went to sit down with her, there's always an assumption. We assume things about people. We try not to, right? We're good people, we try not to assume. And I've learned this lesson the hard way, thinking somebody had something because of the way that their picture looked or didn't look. This lady, my agent sat down with her and she was like, I want to I want to buy a house and I have a down payment. And the agent was like, oh, okay, great. How much money do you have for your down payment? I have $200,000. She's making like $30,000 at a 7-Eleven a year. Like, how did you? It is baffling. But again, it was important to her to save. So she chose saving over whatever else it was in her life. And she believed that she could do it. And therefore she did.
I love those stories. I love them on so many different levels.
Me
I,
too.
I I don't even know which ones I want to jump in on first, but I'll go with whichever one comes to my mind first. That's probably the only thing I can think of to do. You talked about the uh, yeah, of course my mind's going blank now because I'm blown away by all your stories.
That's okay. I've got a lot of them.
They're very good ones too. I really like
Thank
them.
you.
I know where I'm going to go. I'm going to go Dave Ramsey. Now, we are on episode 2 of Money. We are nowhere near in the range that Dave Ramsey is in terms of popularity. We're going to
Yeah,
get there. It's going to
I
happen,
think
but
so.
we're not there. We're not anywhere near there. But
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey he's very popular. I think he gets a lot of things right. He gets criticized for some things, and I could possibly go along with some of the criticisms. I want to comment on one of the criticisms though, because I think it's a little bit off base. One of the things that he likes to say, by the way, he also advocates the idea of having used cars rather than new cars. So you're right in the
Yep.
Dave Ramsey wheelhouse on that one.
Wonderful.
But
Didn't even think.
one of the other things that he advocates is pay off your mortgage as fast as possible.
Hmm.
He really believes very strongly in that. And he's gotten a lot of criticism because there are people who have pointed out, well, wait a minute. If you're paying 3% on a mortgage and you can earn 6% someplace else, that's really not the smart thing to do.
Hmm.
Now, mathematically, I get what they're saying. It's very obvious what they're saying. But, and this is the thing that I want to underline, you identified the clear question. It isn't what the amounts of money are, it's what your values are.
That's
And
right.
that's not included in either David Ramsey's evaluation or the evaluation of the people who are criticizing them. They're both leaving that piece out.
Yeah.
That's the most important piece of all.
It's what drives everything. It's our belief systems. Our belief systems are driving everything. So if you value having no debt, and that's your belief system of having debt is bad, you're going to go in that direction. And it's going to kill you to have debt.
Yeah,
And some people don't have that same belief system or value set. And there's no right answer. And to add to that, you don't have to keep it once you find out what it is. Like you can change your mind at any point. This was what I valued. And now, because of the new information that I have, whatever that may be, I'm deciding to go this direction.
I like that.
Yeah.
So the second thing I want to address, you talked about how you were amazed that you could save, what did you say, $1,300 worth of change in 3 months
Yeah.
or something like that. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, okay.
I
But
clearly had cash.
yeah, right. It cued something in my mind. What it cued in my mind was what happened during the pandemic. Now, listeners of this show don't know my background. I'll touch on it right now. People who've listened to me on LOA Today for years, they know my background there, but here they don't. So I've been self-employed since roughly 2002. Um, I also got wiped out by the 2008 financial crisis, not because I invested poorly. I didn't actually have much to invest anyway. It wasn't really the issue, but it
Yeah.
was rather that the crisis wiped out my clientele. My clientele were very small local nonprofits around the country, and they all got wiped out really, really quickly. So my
Mhm.
business got wiped out, and I was married at the time. My ex-wife's business also got wiped out. So we basically lost our entire income within about a month, which was terrifying.
Yeah.
And of course, in the middle of a financial crisis where the last thing you can do is go get a job.
Yep.
Was not a good situation.
No, terrifying.
Over the next 4 years, we just went deep into debt. It just got worse and worse and worse. I won't even talk about how deep it was because it doesn't really matter. Because if it's too deep, it's too deep. It doesn't matter what the dollar amount is. And it was too
That's
deep. I started the podcast for LOA Today back in 2012 for that reason. That's why I started it. And then over the next few years, first I was learning about how law of attraction worked, but I also learned about how I worked and where I was undermining myself and so forth. So I was doing work on myself, but I still had to dig out from underneath that pile of debt. And it wasn't happening quickly. It took a long time.
yeah.
By the time the pandemic hit in March 2020, I had paid down, I'm going to say, a third of it, something like that.
Hmm.
And throughout the pandemic, of course, we're in lockdown, especially for that first year. We couldn't do anything, right? I mean, my biggest thing to do was to do podcasts. That was it. There wasn't a whole lot for us to be able to do. I did have an inheritance that came in that helped cover, I'm going to say about 50% of what the total was. So bottom line was there was still another 20% that I couldn't pay down. Actually, the inheritance didn't cover that much. It covered about 30%. And during the pandemic, I was deliberately paying down the rest out of what income we had to work with. But there was still 20% that I couldn't account for. And the reason that's important is by 2022, no, by 2021, we were out of debt. And I remember doing the show and realizing that was true and saying, where did the other 20% come from? I couldn't figure it out. And I mean, I was like taking mental inventory, like, okay, I know I have this income, I have this income. This is what all that I have. Where did it come from? How did I do that? So it wasn't even on that episode. I had to go between episodes and go back. I have a record keeping thing. So I had to go back to my record keeping and study it and say, where did the money come from? And then I finally realized what it was. We were in lockdown. I couldn't spend any money on anything. All the discretionary money, that's what I got the extra 20% to pay off the debt.
Yep.
I said, you got to be kidding me. Discretionary funds accounted for 20% of the debt that I'd been carrying for the last, what was it, 12 years? I mean,
Right.
holy cow.
Yeah. And you think about how the interest builds
Oh,
over
yeah.
those 12 years. Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
So that really just nails your point very, very clearly to the table in front of us where we can't ignore it and where it's starting to smell because it's getting old. I mean, it's just,
Exactly.
it is
Yes.
astonishing how much money there is in discretionary spending.
Yeah, and that's why I say reality isn't real because I think that we have a version in our head of what is happening and what we're spending our money on, and the real story of what you did if you look back. And the unfortunate thing is that people are so afraid to look that
Mhm.
they don't want to. They feel shame, they feel embarrassed, they feel anger. There's a lot of emotion around what we did with our money and what that means about us. And the true story is that you get to decide what it means about you. You get to decide, that that was a mistake and you're learning from it and growing from it. It's not the whole story. It was one, you know, point of the story, but not the whole thing. Or you can focus on that mistake or focus on those feelings and continue to stay stuck. But everything starts with awareness, whether we're talking personal development or your own personal finances. Everything starts with awareness and putting the stick away, allowing yourself to see what's going on from a place of care, kindness, curiosity even, and then evaluating why did I do those things? Like, we don't do things for no reason. We do everything for a reason. Like, there's a meaning and a reason behind everything. So the $700 I was spending on fast food, the reason that I was spending that money, not because I love McDonald's, believe it or not.
Sorry, McDonald's, too bad.
Yeah, yeah, sorry. No, and a lot of it was Tim Hortons, which is like a coffee chain or whatever. I used to like Tim Hortons breakfast sandwiches. It's a Canadian thing. I think they have them now in the States, but they've gone down. I won't say that. Never mind. Cancel that. I don't eat there ever
Well,
anymore.
let's put it this way, Jody Lynn, your value has changed on that.
My value has changed. I don't pay $17 for crap anymore. I just won't do it. I don't do it. But what I realized when I was able to get myself in a place of curiosity. Okay, I'm curious, what did I spend? And then work like hell not to beat myself up over it so that I could look at the patterns. Like, I would have told you I really never really eat out. That's what I believed. And then I see this number, like 500 to $700, like 3 months in a row. What's going on? Okay, let's get curious about it. Let's see. When do I go to Tim Hortons or McDonald's? Like, when am I going? And this was my pattern. I was so focused on getting out of my house at a certain time and being at the office at a certain time, even when I didn't have appointments. My nervous system was in overdrive to hustle. And so I wanted to be the one, right? I got to go hustle. So I convinced myself that at all times that I should have been doing more. I was shooting all over myself. But I hadn't really gotten that awareness just yet. But what I realized in looking at this picture, it was, oh, I'm hustling to get to the office for 9 a.m. What do I not do before I leave the house? I don't eat breakfast and I don't pack a lunch. Okay, great. Some information there. Not good, not bad, just is. Okay. Okay. I don't make breakfast. I don't eat breakfast and I don't make a lunch. Okay. Then what happens? Then I go to the office and I'm there for 9. Okay, great. And then what happens? Then I'm there until about 1 o'clock, I get hangry because I've ignored my body, the hunger signals, and I have made work my only focus and priority. It's not like I had clients or deadlines, not every single day. Like, you can't tell me that you're like doing all the work. You're working 100% every single day of the week from, 9 a.m. till 1 o'clock. Like, let's be honest here. You're not a robot. Neither am I. So, okay, I was avoiding eating breakfast and making my lunch because I prioritized being at the office at 9 a.m. Okay, all right, great. And then what did I do? I would get hangry to the point where I just needed to have some food. I didn't want to sit down and eat. I couldn't wait to sit down and eat because I've waited too long. I'm too hungry. And what is right down the street? Tim Hortons, McDonald's,
I could have predicted that one.
right? So in my hour of need, when I'm just starving and I just need to stuff my face with something or I'm gonna die or that's what it feels like, I would just go to those places. So now I know what the pattern is. Okay, I perceive I need to be at the office at 9 a.m. and I don't have time, quote unquote, to make my lunch or eat breakfast. I wasn't prioritizing those things. And so instead of prioritizing making something at home and bringing it with me, or even prioritizing my own body and nourishing it, I was prioritizing being at the office at 9 a.m. all by myself most days. And so then from there, I can choose. Okay, I don't want to wake up earlier because I was already waking up at 5 a.m. at that time. It would take me from 5 a.m. till, like 8 o'clock to do all the things that I needed to do, whether it was workout, read my goals, read a book, read 10 pages. I did all of the things, right? Meditate, do yoga. I tried to cram everything into the morning and I really couldn't fit anything else in. And I did not want to wake up earlier than 5 because I was going to bed at 11 o'clock midnight. So I
Oh
just
boy.
wasn't, yeah, I wasn't getting enough sleep. So I'm not going to adjust the time because my body needs the sleep. Um, I'm either going to adjust the time that I go into the office and make my lunches, or I'm going to choose to be okay with eating McDonald's and Tim Hortons. And I chose that that wasn't good for my body, and I didn't really want to eat that stuff. I wanted to nourish my body, and I wanted to treat myself better than that instead of starving myself for half the day every day. That's not a good feeling. I don't want to operate like that. So that's when I started making my own lunches and making breakfast and doing those kinds of things. That's where the value became for me. I'd rather spend that money on something else that I'm choosing to instead of on unconsciously choosing to.
And I love the fact that you're not treating one decision as if it was wrong and the other decision as if it were right. You're saying one was the old value system and the other is the new value system.
Yeah. And it could have just left it the way that it was. There's no there's nothing wrong with that. If you're conscious of I want to spend $500 a month on crap. Okay, great. You get to choose. It's your money. Like Nate, my husband Nate, he always puts things in dollar values. Like, okay, he makes $100 an hour, let's say. Okay, if I want to spend $500 for me to eat at McDonald's all month, like every day, all month or whatever, however many days a week I'm in the city and whatever, but to have lunch at McDonald's is costing me $500. So I need to work for 5 hours that month to cover it. Is it worth 5 hours of my time?
Mm.
Not McDonald's, not for me. They don't have that good of food, like that's 5 hours I could have spent with my family, my
Mm.
friends. I could have spent learning a new language. I don't know, getting new business. I when you start to break it down like that, of how much time it's going to take you to pay something off, it changed the way that I looked at the things I was buying.
I love that. I love that completely. I think that's probably the best advice anyone could give. And I want to thank you for sharing that. We try to keep these under an hour and we're coming in close on, we're about 10 minutes away from our hour mark. So we'll start to wind things up. But we do have one thing that I want to talk about before we do the wind up. Actually, it'll be the second one, but that'll take 30 seconds. This one's going to take a little bit longer. I want to talk about how we as people, regardless of what our financial situation is, we are the ones who put pressure on ourselves because of those value systems. And the reason it happens is we have a tendency to try to decide, are my values going to match my monetary values, or are they going to match my values regardless of what my monetary values are? That's the tension that we end up dealing with. And that tension doesn't get any attention. It's a tension that doesn't get attention. Figure that one out.
Yep.
But it's a tension. It's a tension that causes us to freak out at times, or at least to feel uncomfortable at times about how we're spending our money, how we're investing our money, how we're not investing our money, how we're wasting our money, whatever way that we're looking at it, how
Mhm.
we're dealing with the money based on the fact that the monetary value is different from the way that we value it non-monetarily. That
Mhm.
tension messes a lot of people up. I want to talk about that for a moment. I mean, when you think about that, what's your viewpoint on that?
Oh, well, I think it comes back to the awareness piece. A lot of times we don't know what's driving us. And it could be an old belief system that's driving that tension of like, I need to prove that I'm worthy. And to prove that I'm worthy, I have to have a really nice car and a really big house. And okay, do you? I think we don't ask enough questions about what we're thinking about or what we're feeling. We're afraid to go down that road. And the more that we ignore it, it's just like anything else, you know, what you resist persists.
It's true.
Right? So I think that that comes back in. What do you think?
Well, it's also, I think, where the setup comes in.
Mhm.
I'm going to think about it from the point of view of a young man who started a family and he's finding himself working, two or three jobs or something, uh, long hours in order to feed the family.
Yeah.
And this is going on and on, and that kind of thing creates all kinds of issues. I mean, it creates issues in terms of the relationship with the wife. It creates issues with the kids. It creates issues with the work. I mean, there's all these different kinds of issues that come out of that. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying there's an example of somebody whose monetary value didn't necessarily match their non-monetary value, but they felt like they had to make the match in some way.
Hmm.
They
Well,
tried to merge the two together.
Yeah, and I think that there's assumptions in there too of like, especially when it comes from men. Men need to be the provider. That's kind of
Mhm.
what
That's the
you guys
role.
are. Yeah, that's the role. It's how you're hardwired. You want to be the provider. So in this context of our society, the provider provides the money, the house, the cars, those kinds of things. And I think it's really interesting because I'll see couples on opposite sides of the table of saying, I want this. I'll see, the lady say, "Oh, I really like a brand new house or whatever," and then in the same breath, we don't spend enough time together. And or, the wife saying, we don't spend enough time together. And the man saying, I'm just trying to give you what you said you wanted, the house and the things like that. There's that disconnect of like where we're headed,
Mhm.
and what's important to us both at this time. And like where those levels are. Like, if you gotta get shit done for a couple of weeks, and like a couple of weeks is just a small period of time, okay. But to, work out of town, my husband and I had this conversation when we first started dating. He was working out of town at the time, and I said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in a relationship with someone that is gone 2 to 3 weeks out of the month and then comes back for 1 week. That's not enough for me. He was already getting outside of that job. He didn't want to work out of town anymore. He was doing it because he wanted to make the money to buy the house and do the
Oh,
things, right? So, and I think it's about being honest about what is important to us and not assuming. Instead of making the assumption of this is what they want because they said, "Oh, I'd really like this nice car." It could be just they were like, "Wow, that's a really nice car. That'd be nice." They didn't know the cost of that is you working like crazy for the next year to be able to provide that. I think it's that honesty and that transparency about what is really important. And if you can't have this, what do you want instead?
you're also talking about the not just a difference, it's actually a similarity, a connection between the honesty and what I'll call the communication with yourself and the honesty and communication with your partner.
Yeah.
Because all four of those have to be in place in order for not only for the relationship to survive, but for the family to continue to be the family that it wants to be.
Yeah.
Because if you don't
Absolutely.
have that, it falls apart.
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. You gotta have that communication. And it's not easy. And we're growing. So things change over time. So you got to give yourself grace encourage to have these kinds of conversations with yourself first to understand what you want and what you think that the other person wants. And then you have to have the courage to ask the question, is this really what you want? Is this what you mean when you say this? If I have learned anything about relationships, is that men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and we speak completely different languages. It is the wildest thing, how we even just interpret data in our own minds. It's different between a man and a woman. So,
That's cool. I love
yeah.
that. I can't remember who the author of that book is, but I'm sure he's smiling right now,
Yeah,
hearing
me
the reference.
neither. Yeah, I got it somewhere here. Yeah.
Well, this has been fabulous as usual. I think we've already nailed it with episode 2, so we're going to put this one to the bank. I'm going to start a practice. I don't necessarily expect you to join in on this, Jodie Lynn. I want everyone to know I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for Jodie Lynn, the financial advisor, just so you know. But I mentioned it last week, and I think I'm going to start mentioning this for a while. And that is Bitcoin is not money. I want to keep repeating this over and over again because Bitcoin is not money. And the way we know that it's not money is that it doesn't get used as money. So if you've invested in Bitcoin because you think it's money, guess again. That's my advice. Follow it,
Yeah,
don't follow it. It's entirely up to you. Again, this is not Jodie Lynn. This is me speaking, but I'm just here to tell you Bitcoin is not money. That's it
that's
for
right.
today. Thank you very much. We'll see you all next time here on Money.